Alrighty, yay, we're good to go. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Worldhoppers. For today's video, we're discussing how Booktube, both as viewers and being on Booktube, has kind of changed us as readers, how it influences us, maybe sometimes for the better or for the worse. So we're going to start with kind of differentiating how we feel differently about being on Booktube versus watching Booktube and how that's kind of affected us.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. I'm supposed to go. I listened when you said that we were doing it that way. I don't think I've ever been first. I definitely read more. I definitely buy more books. It's just more. Everything is more. Like reading has become more of a priority, both because I know I need to do it to have content and because it's more on my mind, because when I watch it, I get more excited. I mean, I didn't know about new releases ever unless it was like on the news before starting to follow Booktube. So it's just a bigger part of my life altogether. Like not even, obviously filming takes time, but just like in general, books take up more like space in my brain now than ever, and more space in my wallet, more space in my house, more space everywhere.
And we'll definitely go into specifics about some of those things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that my reading has changed, especially because I read more consistently now than I ever did before, despite going into really bad reading slumps at times. I do feel a bit more pressure to be consistently reading, and especially the pressure to kind of be reading the books that are popular at the moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm definitely more of a consistent reader and more of a consistent book buyer now. So it takes up way more of my life than it ever has before.
You love it. I love to see it. Wait, was the order me or Izzy? I forgot.
You, Jess.
Yeah, more. I would say my reading has, it depends. Like right now, my reading has decreased a little bit. But still, I feel like I read more consistently and obviously buy more. And same with Leanna. Really before joining the online book community in general, I didn't know about new releases and keep up with, knowing things that are coming out months in advance. So it definitely has taken up a big part of my life. It kind of is my life. Sad that it is.
That's so real though, Jess.
Yeah.
Sad or fun?
Yeah,
I don't think that's fun. It's fun.
Awesome. I wasn't a Booktube viewer I saw Booktube, realized it was a thing, and started my channel like 2 days later. So I don't really have a comparison for like watching only versus also being a booktuber, because I just was like, let me be a booktuber, sure. So yeah, it was a pretty quick thing, but I mean, I definitely read a lot more now that I'm on Booktube, now that I'm aware of it, and just in the online bookish community in general. Definitely learn way more about different things and just all the recommendations that you see and get, and like especially being part of the community and like getting to know people, getting to know other booktubers and getting to know their taste. So I'm like, oh, okay, if they like that, I'll probably like it. If Leanna likes it, I probably won't.
I was about to say, you mean you find out what not to read by seeing what's on my TBR?
We all have somebody that's our evil book twin. It's fine.
Shauna, I feel like we're always laughing like, oh, well, you loved it, so I'm probably going to hate it.
Yeah, it's very hit or miss.
I didn't, when I first saw Booktube, I guess it was back in the like YA days. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's that. And like, I then became a romance reader, and I was like, where are the romance people? Like, there was no one. It was like, everyone was talking about YA and then like some fantasy. So it was interesting because I didn't watch it a ton before I finally made a channel, because I was like, we need more people talking about romance. And then now in the last year, it's been like an explosion of romance channels.
Be the change you want to see.
Exactly. Which is great. I love it. But I do think it has the thing. I mean, it's more. It's what everyone else said. It's more. It's like more reading time, more buying, bigger TBRs, never-ending lists of things I want to read.
Never-ending lists, for sure.
Never.
Sometimes it's depressing. I look at all the books that I want to read and I'm like, it's never going to happen.
I'll die first. I'm not going to make it.
Yeah, I'm going to die for sure. So I got into Booktube. I went through college and grad school where I went through lots of reading slumps, and I was not a consistent reader. Like I would read every summer when I was like off of school, and I'd go to the library and like pick out books. And at that point, I obviously was totally unaware of new releases. I would just pick out like ones that looked interesting based on what they had at the library, which I kind of miss those days. I miss not knowing so much about books, being able to just like go into things not having any expectations and just being like, oh, I wonder what this is about, or the cover looks interesting, because that just doesn't happen anymore because I'm just so much more aware of what's out. And I do find it really interesting. It happens more so at the library than the bookstore, but when I come across a book that I haven't heard of, I'm like, oh, that's intriguing because I've never heard of it. So I do like that sometimes. But I watched Booktube and was reading blogs for about 6 months before I started my channel. And as far as like the difference between if I was just a viewer over if I am a booktuber, although I haven't posted a video in over a month. For those of you who don't know, I am currently very pregnant, so I just haven't been reading much, and I haven't been making videos, but I will one day return, I promise. But the difference is I am a little bit pickier about what I pick up because I'm going into the book knowing that I'm going to have to talk about it. So some of the, I don't know, maybe this is like a shameful thing, but some of the more controversial books I kind of like don't pick up because I don't want to have to play around things, or I don't know, I'm just not as brave as some other people when it comes to like that kind of stuff. I just want to stay away from the drama for the most part, versus if I knew that I could read it without having to talk about it, I think I would try more of those things. Like I would hear about the controversy from being a Booktube viewer, and I would want to like read it and be able to form my own opinion with the freedom of knowing that I don't have to tell anybody that I read it, that kind of thing. So I do think that knowing that I'm going to be talking about it, because also everyone runs their channel a little bit differently, right? So I personally use my channel as like kind of like a book diary, and I talk about every single thing that I read. So like obviously that's my choice. Like I could read something and choose not to talk about it on my channel, but that's just not how I run my channel. I like to talk about everything that I pick up and why I do or don't like it or whatever. So because of that mindset, I am a little more picky about what I pick up because I know that eventually I'm going to talk about it on my channel and have to like give reasons about why I liked it. And if there's like a controversial author, I don't want people like coming after me and things like that. So I do put a lot more thought into things like that. And also, like other people have mentioned, I pick up things that are more popular. I think because I know, like, I want to be in on the conversation versus if I was just a viewer, then I would probably do a lot more mood reading, I think.
It's interesting when you said that if you see a book that you haven't heard of, you're intrigued by it because that's unusual. But for me, I feel like if I see a book and I haven't heard of it, my first thought is there must be a reason I haven't heard of this. It's probably very good.
It's like going to indie bookstores and being like, they always have this book here, so I wonder if that's not a good
a lot of people are returning this. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it depends on where I'm at, I guess. But like at the library, usually it's an older book. But at the bookstore, it's like, okay, this is like a new-ish release, probably. Like if it's at the bookstore and I haven't heard of it, I don't know. I find that interesting.
No, I completely agree with that, Jade. Like if I'm in the bookstore and haven't heard of something, I don't even look it up on Goodreads to see like what the rating is, see if my friends have read it. It's something like refreshing about
not having expectations for something.
Yeah. It's kind of nostalgic.
Returning to the old days.
Yeah.
When Borders existed.
We are after this video.
Wait, who said that when Borders is open?
I used to go into Borders all the time and just get stacks of books. And it was also a time when I would read that stack of books and then go back to get more instead of just buying a bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so for me, I don't know, like I started watching Booktube before like we even knew what Booktube was, and was just coming across videos every now and then, and just watching some of the OG creators back in the day. So I feel like being a Booktube watcher was just a little more relaxed than it is now. Being a content creator, I feel like I look at slumps a lot differently now. Like back in the day, if I fell into a reading slump, I would be fine. It's normal, it happens. But now if I'm in a reading slump, it's like, oh my God, I don't have anything to talk about. My channel's gonna die. Like everyone's gonna like wonder what happened. So it's like kind of that pressure of just staying on top of reading. And if things are not working out, if it gets boring, then you feel like your channel gets stagnant. So the slump aspect is something that has definitely affected me being a booktuber.
Yeah, and that's definitely something we'll jump into. We can go into that one next. I think I'll add kind of just on top of a couple of things. So what Jade was saying about, if there's something controversial, some people want to dive into that because they're like, oh, I want to make a video about this. And then some people kind of stray away from it. And I think I lean toward like, I don't know, because I try to be upbeat and positive as much as possible. And there are some people that I think are better equipped to talk about those things than I am. I'm just always like, I'm going to leave something out. But
exactly. I always feel like I'm not knowledgeable enough, and it makes me uncomfortable.
And so what I'll add is I think if I was only making videos, but I wasn't actually viewing very many, I wouldn't even know about a lot of the stuff. It's through viewing more so outside of Booktube. It's more of like the other social media like Twitter and Bookstagram, those sorts of things. Like those things pop up and then I become aware of it. But then it kind of seeps into like, oh, well, shoot, because that author had a tweet and now people are upset and I just read that book and now do I add like the pinned comment or, like.
Take it off your shelf immediately.
You have to throw it in the fire.
Yeah.
Like Instagram story it burning and just really document the process.
And it's funny because I think that I've kind of chatted with a couple of the ladies here about it before. Having a background in music, my degree in music, some composers were not good people. But if we were assigned to play their music in an orchestra concert, I wasn't going to purposefully play terribly and ruin the concert or something. Like you want the art to be exceptional for those who are consuming it. And if you're a part of that, you want to do what you can because the art can be like separate from. So I think that gets into a whole other topic.
It does help that most of those composers are dead.
Yes, as opposed to like can you imagine if those composers were alive today tweeting? It's like,
oh God.
Say. There's some that would absolutely not be able to tweet anymore. They would get tweeted off. But so I just feel like if I only made videos and I didn't consume Booktube, I wouldn't even be made aware. And I feel like we're kind of joking around about the almost negative aspects of this, but at the same time, I am grateful to be aware of other people's experiences and how that shapes their reading taste, or maybe they'll present something about a book that I would have never thought if I only made videos and read and didn't really see other people's thoughts about it. But yeah, I think as far as the pressures and stuff go, because I know we touched on that a little, and I actually have what expectations, pressures, etc. do you feel because of Booktube? I'll let all of you kind of jump on that first before I jump anything. I'll add one more thing to how it's different being on Booktube versus watching it is that I mean, of course I have some of the quote unquote like basic Booktube content like TBRs and whatever, but I also feel like I'm always thinking, not even just watching Booktube videos, but any kind of content, I'm always like, I wonder if I can do something and make a video that's, taking this kind of concept and then turning it into something like over here. I feel like a goofy example is I really love dogs. And so I decided to make a video about assigning certain dog breeds to certain characters from Store My Archive. Like, what kind of dog would they be? Goofy stuff like that, where watching content or consuming content, it then leads me to try to be thinking about other content that I could make, which that also could go into a conversation of like etiquette. When is it inappropriate to kind of be inspired by versus is it just copying? But anyway, what expectations?
One real quick thing before we move on, I'm just curious. I often find that if I'm not watching BookTube, I'm less motivated to create. Do you guys feel that way?
Yeah. No,
Because
that's
I haven't been watching BookTube in almost a year because I've been consuming solely pregnancy content. But yeah, as I'm eating. But it just in general, I find that when I'm not watching as much content, I'm less inspired to actually like make videos. So when I'm having a creation slump, something that helps is like watching a bunch of videos, and then I get all excited about sharing my thoughts again. So I was curious if other people feel that way.
That's a great point.
I do the opposite. I go outside of BookTube and watch other types of content to get inspired about BookTube content.
I'm the same way. I feel like when I watch too much BookTube, I start to get really down on myself and my own creativity and what I'm doing in the community, and like, am I even bringing anything different to the community? And I know that doesn't always matter, but I just go into kind of a spiral about my content and me as a creator and comparing myself to other creators. So sometimes I try to pause from BookTube because I can feel my anxiety about me as a creator getting to be too much.
I think that kind of reminds me of like authors, like ones that don't read their own genre versus authors that do read their own genre. And I think it's it's not always good or bad. And it's not always obvious, but I feel like sometimes it is obvious that like, I'm a big fan of Joe Abercrombie, and Joe Abercrombie almost never reads fantasy. Like he's reading a lot of like history and politics and this kind of thing. And you can see that he's like pulling those influences more than just sort of reading other fantasy. And I feel like to your point about feeling more original, if you're looking like, it's very incestuous if you're looking only at your own genre, your own type of content, your own sphere, versus looking externally and refilling your creative well from things that are totally different from either what you're writing or creating.
I think all of that is really good points. I agree with what Izzy was saying, where I think I get more inspiration watching other people's content, but I think I am. So I guess to use the terminology you used, Jade, the creativity slump is remedied through watching outside of BookTube a lot of times, whereas reading slumps, watching people, watch their vlogs or their reading or their excitement for books gets me kind of pumped again. Almost like you want to be a part of the hype train, or just FOMO. You're like, well, yeah, I want to read. That sounds good. And I think that's definitely helpful. It's like watching, I don't know if you guys do this, but it's like watching when people do cleaning, like clean with me videos, and I'm like, I want to clean my house now. I want to organize.
It's like motivating.
Organize a drawer in 5 minutes.
I think it's interesting because I bet it has to do with how I run my channel, right? Like I do pretty much all staple videos because like I said, my channel is more of like a diary of what I'm reading, and I don't do a lot of like creative videos like a lot of other people do. So I think that watching other people talk about what they're reading gets me excited about reading and what I'm reading and wanting to share my opinions on what I'm reading. And I don't have that creativity piece that you guys are talking about. And also definitely want to agree with the whole like comparison. Like that's a dangerous game to get into, and I try to stay away from that for sure.
And I'm curious, do you feel like that I don't think I have a topic point necessarily, but this kind of plays into what we're talking about. Do you feel like some of that creativity, self-consciousness is influenced by comments that you see people leave, or things that you see on various different social media sites? Like I personally do not go on Guru Gossip, but I think a lot of us are aware of like that kind of thing where people basically say negative things about people, or I guess what I'm getting at is you get they're not like other booktubers type of sometimes. And when I see that kind of stuff on my own channel, it actually, like, I understand sometimes it's one thing if they're like, wow, this was really creative, like this was really fun, I like this, versus like, this is why I like you because you're not. And I'm like, don't.
Please don't.
I do that kind of on other people's channels, and at the end of the day, it's like, aren't we just here mostly for books though? So I'm curious if your self-consciousness is affected by comments, or do you think it's more your internal negative voice?
I think it's both for me. I mean, those comments that you're talking about do affect me a bit. Like, I randomly saw a comment, I don't know whose video it was, but they were talking about how they think all booktubers, except for this one particular booktuber, is really boring. And that everybody in the community is so boring. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not funny.
What a blame.
Everybody.
One thing that bugs me about like viewer gossip and other people who make like generalized statements is like, Booktube is vast. And I think that they don't realize how big it, like they see what they see based on the algorithm and they think that's Booktube. Yes. I have been doing Booktube for almost 6 years, which is kind of a longish time. I mean, I have a medium-sized channel at this point, but like for 6 years, like it's small, you know? And also I watch a lot of other small booktubers that have been around for a long time. Like I don't really watch a lot of the really big people. And so I think like for me, I'm watching people that those people are not watching. And so a lot of their statements just like don't apply. And for me, I see Booktube as like a group of my friends talking about the books that they're reading. And like, it's not, I don't know. I just think it depends on who you're watching.
I agree. And I'll jump on that really quick just to say, I know Jade and I have had conversations about, because, you know, Jade has expressed before, I don't want to speak for her, but like, you know, talking about, well, I do more of that, the staple type content. And I don't have all these like fancy things happening on the screen stuff. And not that one is better than the other, but I think both are great because some of them are more about entertainment and it's kind of fast, quick cuts, all that stuff. And then other ones like, you imagine yourself sitting at a cafe with your friend talking about books. And I think both are great. Sometimes I want to feel calm. Sometimes I want that like kind of chill background. We're just chatting. And then sometimes I want something kind of funny and quick. And what I don't like about comments that do that is I'm like, to me, that shows that you sort of expect everybody to make content for you. It's kind of like an entitled thing.
That's what I was gonna say is like what people, sorry if I'm talking a lot. I haven't made a video in a long time and I haven't been on Worldhoppers for a while, so I'm feeling quite chatty. But that's what I was gonna say is there's an audience for almost any type of channel. Granted, sometimes the audience for that kind of channel like mine might be smaller than like the entertainment kind of channel, or like the people who are really funny are just gonna attract more people, you know? So like, but for me, I don't care like to grow really quickly or to grow much at all. I like having a small, cozy kind of feel to my channel. The thing is there's an audience for every type of creator is my opinion. So it does get hard when you get into the comparison game because you're like, oh, they're growing so much faster. But like, as long as you enjoy what you're creating, I think that's what's more important. And if you are on Booktube because you want to blow up and make a bunch of money, you pick the wrong part of YouTube.
Yeah, you're in the wrong one. You got relations like
anyways,
that. Like
I just want to say there is an audience for everybody out there, every type of creator. Some of those audiences might be smaller, but yeah, I think the people who make those kinds of comments think that everybody who's watching Booktube wants the exact same type of creators, and that's just not true.
It's like the high school, everybody wants to be unique, and so everybody ends up being the same because they're all trying to be unique in the same way. And that would be the problem. If everybody fit that one kind, then all of a sudden everybody would be the same.
Yeah.
I mean, generalizations like that when they say, I like you, I'm like, everybody else is the exact same thing. I mean, that's when people say that about a genre of books, about a type of content, about a type of film. Like that is never true. It's just like there, you can't make generalizations like that. It just really shows how limited your experience is with a particular type of thing or genre of things.
I mean, it's just the same statement, right? They're always like, oh, it's always the same thing in my subscription box. I'm like, then why are you subscribed to those people?
Yeah,
I don't want you here.
Oh,
go ahead, Jashawn.
Oh, sorry. I would say, I feel like I joke about it a lot, but I genuinely feel like being an old broad for Booktube. Like, I just don't care. I just do not care. Like,
just I add to that you ooze confidence in so many areas of your life that like some of us are
way share. Can you share,
Please
please?
spread it around. God.
Honestly, I just feel like in my 30s, I'm just like, I don't give a crap if you don't like I get people commenting sometimes about like, which I know Leanne has gotten to, like, oh, it's not very ladylike to be cursing. And I'm like, I don't go watch someone else then.
Or
like,
like, if you want to be successful on Booktube, maybe you
yeah,
should
like I don't care. I'm here because I like making. I'm with Jade. Like I don't do a bunch of creative stuff. Like every now and then,
like when people complain about the monotony of Booktube content, yes, there is definitely like creative videos you can do that are outside of like the staple content. But Booktube isn't really so much about creativity; it's about personalities. You subscribe to people almost never because of their creativity, or because of the specific books they read. Maybe a bit of. But it's like I'm subscribed to people who like I almost never read the same things they do, and in fact, I disagree. But their personality is one that draws me in, or I find entertaining, or I find interesting.
Yeah.
Because Booktube is basically like hanging out with somebody while they talk about books, and that's the appeal of it.
I feel that Tori, I feel like I had something to say for a bit. I want to make sure.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Tori.
So as far as expectations and I guess pressure goes, when I typically feel it is when someone will leave a comment like, I didn't expect you to read that type of book. Because I think I get known for like one sort of thing or, you know, a certain type of genre. And if I like branch out and read something completely different, I mean, it's not like a negative comment. They're just like genuinely like, I didn't expect that from you, or I didn't think this would be something that you would enjoy. And so that is like a weird level of expectation and pressure. And so now if I see something, I'm like, well, should I read this? Should I talk about this? Like, people gonna unsubscribe? Like,
yeah, I feel that too, definitely, because I read mostly fantasy. I think a lot of people on Booktube read a lot of fantasy, and then if you kind of get known for that, then when you read things outside it, you're like, oh, nobody's gonna want to watch anymore. Nobody cares anymore, which sometimes is kind of true, you know, like, but that's okay because, like Jade was saying, do you want to make that content? Do you want to talk about it? And I do think it's a balancing act of, okay, this might just be a for me thing I can talk to my friends or my husband about. And then sometimes you're like, I bet other people would be interested in this. Like every now and then I'll talk about video games or I'll talk about TV shows like Castlevania or something. And it's fun. I think, it's good. But there's that fear there. And I want to add a little bit to the subscription box and people being like, it's just the same stuff. Do you know there's a search function on YouTube? Like, if there's a book that you like nobody ever, like my husband reads really bizarre, different, in my opinion, I'm like, wow, those are out there. But he has booktubers that he likes to watch that are super outside of like anything else. All you have to do is be like Gravity's Rainbow review, and then you'll find those people. But there's nobody literary. There's nobody intellectual. It's just a bunch of giggly girls talking about YA books. And you're like, it's not. It's not. That's you not knowing how to search things on the internet.
Yeah.
Basically. When people leave comments like that, I'm just like, okay, go find them then. Like, like, go.
But also, if you want to see a young girl giggling about YA, you do that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
And also, let young girls have their own corner of the internet also. Like, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with happy girls enjoying books? I think it's a good
everything is wrong with it.
They're not into that is like the most taboo idea.
They shouldn't read. They shouldn't express their thoughts.
Yeah. It's like as soon as she starts getting ideas and thinking.
She might get I feel like we got really off topic. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. No. And that's like, before we started, I was like, I have a feeling that we're going to like dip into other things here. But, you know, like you said, Jade, you haven't been able to chat with us for a while. And you have a lot of things in the tank. I just really quick, I feel bad. Jess, I feel like hasn't had the chance to say anything. I wanted to make sure that we didn't kind of trample over your time to talk.
No, I was just thinking about the Reddit. So like I follow one page subreddit on books. It's literally called Books, I think. And I sent Elle a screenshot because someone was like, does anyone like feel like no one on BookTube makes like based everything we've been saying? And it was like they were like, I want like a high quality, analytical, deep discussion. And like no one on BookTube.
We'll take an English lit class then.
Yeah, they're like, it's just hauls and, you know, all their little, what was it, their top 10 favorite book colors or something. It was just really condescending. And there weren't a lot of people in the comments were like, I mean, I like this person, person. And to me, I was just like, you want a really specific thing. And because someone was like, you know how they were talking about people who analyze movies or something. And I'm like, but you can consume a movie in a couple hours and then talk about it. A book takes hours and then a lot to dissect it. And there also was a recent video by, I don't know what kind of YouTuber she is, but her name's As Told by Kenya. I haven't watched her. And she did a video on why don't adults read, because someone sent it to me. And she was mentioning like Booktube, but she was like, but here's what I don't see on Booktube. And it again was like, but those exist, you just haven't found them yet. Because it was like, people are just like, I like this trope and I like this character, that's it. She's like, I want a deep analysis. I'm like,
oh my
that's
God.
frustrating because I think part of it has to do with the kinds of books you're reading. So if you're reading fantasy, the ways in which you can go into deep discussions are talking about what are the influences for this fantasy world, what parallels are there for our own world. And sometimes there aren't really going to, it's like the author's just extremely creative and then it's showing an appreciation and pointing out like, here are these things. But it doesn't have to be that. Like you can talk about characters, people that do character analysis videos or lore deep dives. That is kind of the analysis side of fantasy. Whereas something like literary fiction, because my husband does enjoy reading a lot of that, it's basically a game of intellectual trivia. Like what random facts do you know that are in this book? And like he got excited because one time they referenced something that's jazz and he majored in jazz and he's like, I know this one. But he'll have to stop and be like, what is this referring to? And then look it up. And people will go like tabs on basically every paragraph of something referenced here and something referenced here. And this is shouting out this other book before it. And you don't have those same things necessarily for every genre. So deep analysis is going to look different. And also, there's nothing wrong with a person just wanting to express their thoughts about a book. So while I understand, like, maybe you want that kind of a video, one, not everybody does. So it kind of ties back into that. But also, I remember the thing that Jess sent. They're like, there are some people that do it, but their production's not very good. Okay, excuse me. So you want somebody to make like an hour-long video, deep dive something with amazing production. What are they going to film on? It's going to cost money. They got to get lighting. They got to get a good microphone or something. You're asking them to put all this money and time into something
for you.
Exactly, for you.
Right. You're not going to get the payback because
you're going to make 10 cents.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's like, why don't you pay somebody?
Yeah.
And like Deshauna said, go to a class then. Go take a class.
Yeah. I had someone. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Please.
I was going to say, I had someone one time comment some crap like that on one of my videos. Like, I wish you would go into this and that and the thematic blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, first of all, there are booktubers who do that. Go find them. Secondly, I took all the English lit classes in college. I have a writing degree. I don't care to do that anymore. I don't want to feel like I'm in college again, sitting here with all these intellectuals being like, well, this is and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Some people do. That's great. Go find them. Like, I'm not doing it. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Funny enough.
Yeah, I just think that the intellectual, like, people who make that kind of video or like that kind of audience is, like I said, a smaller niche. So you're going to find smaller channels. Like, you're going to have to search out small channels to find that kind of content because something like that is not going to blow up, you know, like that's not what the majority of people are looking for. So those channels are going to be small, but they exist. And then when you have small channels, it doesn't make sense to invest a ton of money in like good quality cameras and stuff. Not that you need that to grow anyways.
But then full circle, when they do exist, those kinds of channels, how much do you want to guarantee that people will find them boring? So then you have the whole cycle again of like, well, this person's boring. They just like
no,
so
all of Booktube is boring.
Yes.
Remember?
Yeah.
Not to always compare Booktube for like writing and authors, but I feel like definitely like what people always tell authors, like, don't try to write for like what is the current like trend in publishing. Don't try to write what you think people want to read. Write what you want to read, and then your book will be good.
I don't know. Do any of you watch Parks and Recreation?
Yes.
Because there's when Bobby Newport is running for office, and what does he say? It's great. He's like, I don't know how to fix this town. I'm counting on you telling me. And that whole part, like, just replace it with like, I don't know what I want to film, you tell me. Or I don't know what I want to read, you tell me. Or for authors, like, I don't know what to write, you tell me. Like, just make what you want to make, you know? And then people will gravitate. And I have to add, and maybe this is just me being sensitive, I don't know. But I do feel like the kind of somewhat condescending, where's all the intellectual stuff? I feel like some of it's rooted in the fact that so much of BookTube is women, because how many, I mean, maybe that does exist. And if anybody knows, I would love for them to leave a comment. But how often are there people that are like, where are all the intellectuals on video game channels? Like, how come we don't do these? I'm like, male dominated thing where a bunch of people are just playing something, they're doing something for fun in their free time, and then they're expressing that interest and they're sharing that with all of you, and then in turn you're like, wow, I connect with this, I want to know what games to play, that game looks fun. How come there's no like, how come all of these people aren't like doing these deep dives into, but I don't know, maybe it's just me being sensitive, but I feel like part of it maybe is because it's ladies.
Well, I think it's also because like where did we talk about it? I feel like we talked about this when it came to sci-fi, but just like things that you did in school, you think about differently. And so even though reading is something that we do for fun, we do for entertainment, we do for escapism, for enjoyment, because books are a thing you read in school, then there's this expectation that if you want to be talking about books, well, then it better be intellectual. Yeah. And you can't just talk about it the way you talk about because you just binge watch Loki and now you're going to talk about Loki because like, oh, well, TV, that's just something that you do for fun. But reading books, no, you can't do that for fun. You do that to analyze it.
I have to add too, I shouldn't say any, but oftentimes an analysis of something at its core still comes down to your interpretation. So you're looking for a person's interpretation. And what is frustrating is some people, they are going to be put down for not expressing the common interpretation. So then you're encouraging people to just say what everybody says supposedly is that, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a book that this is relevant to, but what was that?
Dune.
Well, there's certain things where I'm so sorry because I know I always end up bringing up Malazan Book of the Fallen. But if I were to read that book, which I have read the first two, and I'm like, you know what? I think it's not. I know Steven Erikson will tell people like this was my influence. But if I read it and that's not what I gather and I have a differing opinion, and then you're like, but Steven Erikson said, and it's like, okay. But that wasn't my experience.
Yeah, like that's great, good for him. But
so it's like, do you want to hear other people's opinions, or do you want your own reaffirmed? Or because what I'm afraid it encourages is for people to be inauthentic. It just encourages people to speak with a bunch of authority when ultimately they're just saying their opinions.
That's a good point.
Yeah, for sure.
But even
okay, let's move on.
Sorry,
we have a good topic question.
Kind of even to that though, I guess this is a little, more to the extreme. But when there's something that happens in a book that could be considered like extreme or controversial, but it doesn't bother you, but everybody else picked up on it and mentions it, and then it's like, why didn't you mention this? Why, like, didn't that bother you? Why didn't you say that? Why didn't you catch that? And I'm like, I just read through the book and I was fine. I'm sorry. Like I didn't include this in my review. Like I was good, but
yes, that happened to experiences. I know, Alex is on the channel a lot, Alex Nieves, and he got a comment from someone once that's like, how come no male booktubers ever talk about the sexism in this book? Like, and he was like, like, what is he like?
Speaking on behalf of all men, let me just answer you.
Yeah. Well, and there's certain things where it like makes sense that like he hasn't had the lived experience of experiencing like sexism, right? So like he's probably not gonna pick up on little nuances as much.
Yeah, I feel like that ties into one of the topic questions we had, right, Elle? About
this one, what expectations, pressures do you feel? So I almost feel like this kind of ties into it a little bit because it's sort of like, what are you supposed to pick up on? Which I want to add to, even on that topic, there are some books that even among, specific groups, because people aren't a monolith, they're not going to agree. Some people are going to be like, I didn't think it was a problem. And that happens all the time. So as far as expectations and pressures, I know, Jade, you talked about earlier how there's certain controversial ones that you're like, I'm afraid though, I don't know that I'd want to provide my opinion. Because there's almost this idea like you're supposed to have a certain opinion about books or about certain books and things like that. But
or it's like you're expected to educate or like warn other people about things, but like what if it's something I don't like? What Tori was saying, like what if it's something I don't pick up on because I just like am not that educated on whatever that topic is and I just didn't notice it. And that's like, I don't want to say like my worst nightmare or whatever, but like that's definitely a pressure that I feel because I definitely read for fun. And I mean, the whole Booktube thing for me is just like an escape. It's for fun. And I don't always go into a book with like an analytical mindset, wanting to look for these things that, you know, the author might be. I mean, sometimes it's obvious, right? But sometimes it's not. And sometimes people get offended by things that like I don't even notice. And if I don't know, I think being on Booktube, I try to like research the book a little bit before, so I'm kind of like more aware of what, I don't know, maybe people will think this is a bad thing, but like I will like look up some reviews, just a few, like to get an idea of what people think of a book so that I know if there's certain topics that are like touchy subjects and that I should be paying attention to when I'm reading the book, because otherwise I might not like notice it. So there is like a level of pressure of wanting to make sure I don't miss things like that, or just like to be aware so that if I am choosing to read a book that has something like that in it, that I can pay attention to it when I'm reading, versus like, you know, going back to pre-Booktube, like I wouldn't have done that. I would have just read it and just like not noticed it and been oblivious or whatever. But that definitely, there is that sort of pressure because you're reading for an audience in some sense, which is hard for me because I want to read for fun. I just want to read what I want to read and not have to think about it so much sometimes. But I feel like because I talk about everything that I read on my channel, I have to put a little more thought into it. And that's like an expectation that viewers have.
I think that's kind of something that like maybe this isn't quite on topic, but like something that I feel like I have learned or am learning and still kind of like sorting out, I guess, is like we all have different experiences, different perceptions of things based on our life experiences, our personalities, our traumas, etc. And like, yeah, what might be alarming in a book or offensive from a character or in a book, or thematic stuff in a book like that bothers me might not bother someone else, or vice versa. And like one example I can think of that I read recently is The Extraordinaries by T.J. Klune. Super cute, lovely little story. Not to get into the topic, but just a topic that I care about is like, I don't know, police reform, etc., that whole thing, right? And I was reading this book and I was like, this feels like police propaganda a little bit. I'm not a big fan of that. And I went and looked on Goodreads, and some people had commented on it, and the author, he actually put out a statement about it as well. But like a lot of people didn't like say anything about it and just were like, this was fun and like blah, blah, blah. But like they probably aren't as maybe not aware of the topic, not as involved, maybe just don't care. Like, you know, they just don't care about that topic. And, you know, however I feel about that is neither here nor there, but just like they didn't pick up on this because it's just not in their head like it was in mine, you know, and like with different traumas and things too. Like there's a lot of stuff that I probably don't read as being really like not offensive, but yeah, like, oh, this could be someone, like trigger warnings are a thing that I do feel a little bit of pressure to like have content warnings. And I certainly try with like big stuff that's like really obvious, you know, if there's like sexual assault in a book, especially if it's like graphic, you know, I'm like, hey, FYI, or, you know, murder or like child death or something like that. But there's a lot of stuff that I'm just not going to even think of as needing a content warning. And I feel like I do feel a little bit of pressure to like be more aware of the various things that might require that, you know? And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think it is like learning the balance of like, I'm doing my best. I'm going to try. I might miss stuff, and it has to be okay, right? With me. Some people might not like it. They might get mad at me, but like, okay, you know, like that's going to happen. And it is what it is. You know, they don't have to keep watching my channel if I missed something that upset them or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I think another aspect of that whole thing too is how Western, how the publishing industry is kind of more present in, like, you know, US, UK. And so a difficult thing as well is that I feel like there are certain instances, we don't need to go into the specifics of this, but something like the book Woven in Moonlight, which was being praised continuously by people in publishing, other authors, and it even made that Times top 100 and everything. And then there are some people who are South American saying there are some things in here that aren't necessarily accurate, and while the author is somebody whose family is from South America, they ultimately grew up in America, so then their experience is not the same as South American people who like live in South America. So I think a lot of it too has to do with where it's prominent, and also who is getting the chance to read things the most often and whose voices you hear the most often. So in the US, like the US, it's very accessible as far as, you know, being able to get books. Books are very accessible here, as opposed to like someone who is, I love, but Patrick talked about, you know, it's difficult as an international reader. It's just not something you can get as easily. It's more expensive. And so you often have more US, UK channels getting bigger because things like book hauls do really well. And that's an easy way to discover somebody. And then those also get more views. And then it's easier to keep making content. And then it's easier to keep buying books. And you're also talking about having the privilege to spend time reading books that a lot of people don't have as much time with. So there's so many other aspects that it's important. Like, I guess I'm just trying to tie into what Sean is saying and finding that balance is sometimes you feel like I need to make sure I'm being honest about how I felt about this book. Like, these are my feelings about it based off of my life and experiences. And then there are other people whose voices don't get heard as often. And you want to make sure you're not covering them, speaking over them, but you also can't be inauthentic and pretending like you're going to have the same experiences as them and therefore the same feelings. Like, they're going to notice things you don't. And that's what I think is great and that we can appreciate about BookTube and about book reviews and different opinions is that it just showcases how different so many different people are. But at the same time, you don't want to, because I've seen some people do it, like they get defensive about books. They feel the need to be like, no, that's not true. When it's like, it's not necessarily a matter of you need to protect this book. It's you need to allow people to interpret art the way they're going to.
Yeah. On all counts.
I think there's also a difference both in content creators and in viewers and how they regard BookTube being either as like, there's me and my channel and my books, and I talk about things like that's it, versus a community that you're a part of. And it's like a book club where like the way you participate in this book club is by making videos, but like you're here to talk to each other and to other people, to the people in the comments, to the other content creators. And like, there's nothing wrong with having a channel that's like by itself that you just want to do your thing and not really talk to anybody else. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong about that. But like when we talk about maybe you're not the right person to be talking about this, like that's when you can collaborate with other people and you can talk to other people and invite them onto your channel to discuss it, or go on their channel to discuss it, or invite that discussion because you know you're not going to notice everything about every book, and be it a sensitive issue or not. And like that is what's good about a community of readers, because then everybody can come and say, hey, I read this book, so did you. It's on everybody's TBR this month, and we are all going to express how we felt about it like a book club.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I always try, like, if I'm reading a book that I know is like if it's like an issues book, you know what I mean? Like the topic is very much like a socio-political or like a social justice issue or whatever. And if it's like from the perspective of a marginalized person that I am not, I try to find like individual reviews or like wrap-ups from people from that marginalized group that are talking about it, because like I know I'm not gonna pick up on everything probably because of my life experiences and everything. So I try to do that as much as possible, because like you said, you don't want to like talk over people's experiences, especially if they have a more like relatable experience. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Honestly, like the community aspect of Booktube is one of my like favorite things about it, because growing up, like I was a reader like since I was very young, and it was just such a solitary experience. There was never, I mean, I didn't have a lot of friends that read the same kind of books that I did. And just like being able to experience books and then to be able to talk about them with other people who have read the same things is just such a cool thing for me, because like growing up, it wasn't really like that. I mean, yeah, book clubs exist, but when I mean, as a young child and like in middle school and high school, I was always kind of like seen as like, not the loner, like I had friends, but like, you know, reading was seen as like really nerdy and like it's something that you do alone, right? And now reading has become like a group experience because of the internet, not just Booktube. And I think that is like such a cool thing. So I love the community aspect of Booktube and being able to discuss. I mean, even when there are hard and difficult topics to discuss, it gives us an opportunity to do that when, like in the past, when you read something, a lot of times you were just like in your own bubble and in your own head about what you thought about that book or whatever.
I think kind of tying into this, do you ever feel like it goes too far with its expectations of influencers? And I think to some degree, everybody would say yes, maybe, I don't know. But I think where the line is for too far might be different from person to person. Something that is not as controversial, but just is kind of a part of this. I feel like when my channel was smaller, it was much easier to keep up with comments. And, you know, you get the occasional person that you're like, oh, this weirdo. And then you're just like, whatever. But then as it's grown, there are days where, because I have a long kind of almost like backlist of videos, for those that don't know, when you go to check your comments, it will show you, unless you're looking at a specific video, it'll show you like whatever the very newest comment is. And it gets to the point where there are some days where I'm like, I have to distance myself from social media because it's just, I am kind of like what Jade was saying, like the loner aspect. I really value like having like really close friends or family. So just like spending time with my husband and my dog and things like that. And I like to be alone, and I like to actually read books, and I like to do other hobbies as well. And so I do feel like kind of minor thing is the expectation to, maybe it's more so on myself and not from other people, but to be able to engage with everybody all the time. Like a long time ago was like, I cannot keep up with Instagram DMs. I would get through like whatever, like 99. And then by the time I finish, there's like 30 more to go. And I can't do it. But there's emails. Then there's the Patreon, and then there's various different Discords, which I can't do Discord. And then there's Twitter, and then there's your comment section. And then also like on your website, somebody might send you a message. And so I think more an expectation I had on myself. But every now and then there will be a comment that'll say, it's pretty few and far between, because I think most people are understanding that you're not going to see everything. But every now and then there will be a comment that's like, how come you never answer comments? And you're like, I just answered like 100 yesterday. It's just I'm not answering these ones today because I have to read books sometimes if I'm going to make videos. So that's just a small thing. But I know there's like growing pains with Booktube. As your channel gets bigger, it's like, you feel bad because you can't keep up with everybody. And then also just feeling like you're never doing enough. Like, oh, I didn't link everything in the description bar, or I didn't have captions for this video, or there's those sorts of things as well. And they're important to you. But at some point you're like, I would spend all my time if I were to make everything perfect and talk to everybody. And sometimes you just can't.
You would never get a video out if that was the case.
It would take a whole week to get one video out.
I think viewers need to remember that like creators, booktubers, we're just people. Like we're not, I mean, a lot of us have jobs. Some people are full-time students, sometimes full-time moms, sometimes, you know, we have things that we're doing. We're just people, you know, we don't have like a team of people working for us. And because we're just people, we make mistakes, but also like we can't do all the things, you know, and we have to find a balance and be able to, you know, read and do booktube to whatever extent we're comfortable with. And for all the reasons that you were just talking about, Elle, are reasons why like I don't care that my channel is like slow growing or whatever. I've only recently gotten to the, I mean, not lately, but I guess, but I, at the beginning of this year, started to feel like I was spending a lot of time trying to answer comments and things. And I was having trouble keeping up with that. And so at that point is actually when I decided to, this is really off topic, but I created a Patreon because I wanted to be able to have like a small group feel where I could be able to interact with people more intimately, but I couldn't do that with everybody who was watching my channel. So I had to create like a separate area for that. And that's worked really well for me. I've been able to keep like a personal feel with the people who really, you know, want to personally interact with me. I still, you know, do my best to answer comments and stuff, but I just, definitely there are growing pains, and at certain points you have to let things go because I'm just one person and I have a life. I'm about to have a baby. Like I'm not going to be able to answer everyone's comments all the time for the rest of the life of my channel. It's just like impossible, you know?
So I don't know. Sorry. I don't know if Jess has a similar pressure sometimes where I feel like because I cover drama, like in the romance world specifically, and Jess covers, you know, like everything, where people expect us to be like arbiters of like the entire, like, you know, if we want to read an author that's bad or did something, like I got yelled at in my last Romance Landia news because I was like, yeah, I'm still going to read one last stop. And then the person's like screaming at me in the comments, like, how dare you? This is why this author sells a platform. And I was like, I have an arc of the book. I did not buy it. I could go to my library and get it. I can read the book and evaluate comments made about the book and give my opinion. Like, just because I'm over here telling you, like, there's this issue in this book, this dumb person on TikTok said some really awful things. But, like, I feel like there's this weird pressure sometimes when you cover, like, the drama parts to, like, be so on for every single issue.
Yes.
And I'm like, I can't. Like, I have to research the issue. I want to know what's going on, you know, before I speak out about it. I don't want to just blatantly share misinformation because that's terrible. Mm-hmm. And like, it's just this weird, I don't know, it's a weird dynamic sometimes with your audience. I feel like where I'm like, oh boy, are they going to yell at me or are they going to be like cool about it?
I feel you. Every time I put up a video, I'm like, it's today the day. I become the Twitter villain of the day. Like, but I feel that same thing. I did a found family video and I thought about it before I put it up. It was like, none of these authors, well, all of the authors were white. I was like, I'm going to do it. And then someone was like, this just doesn't seem on brand for you because you talk about, you know, the importance of diversity and all these things. And I'm like, I just haven't read those yet. I'm sorry. Like, then I'm like, do you have any, you know, by authors of color that you can recommend me? Because I did ask that in the video. But I definitely feel that that you have to be on, or, you know, you're going to know about every single thing that's going on. Yeah. People are always like, have you heard of this? Or and I'm like, I mean, I see a lot. I don't see it all. And then every single book, a lot of pressures just about when something happens. I'm like, do I need to rearrange my bookshelves this week? Just
the controversial ones out from camera view.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like when everything happened recently with Sarah J. Maas, someone sent me the book, the latest book, and I was like, well, I'm planning to read it. So the beginning of my video, I was like, and yes, I know, like, you know, caveat at the beginning. So it definitely is like an expectation to never make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And I feel like because I've made a point to kind of try to be open about my learning process on the internet, that people feel more inclined to send me things like about like, oh, you were doing ableist language, like, because I seem open, and I am. People comment more, like send me emails about things. I'm like, here's what you could change, or here's what you should do, or I'm like,
There's a aspect to that I like you're saying you are open, and if you say something or if you slip, and because all of us say things that currently we're in this interesting in between of, is this word actually offensive or not, and something specific, but I think that there are people who make zero effort whatsoever. They don't care, and those people are probably not going to be the ones to have anybody send them anything. And so I'm saying, I'm not trying to speak for you, Jess, but like, you're working tirelessly to do everything you can to get everything right. And then there are even more points to be like, well, this one thing you said, or the way you worded this was actually really offensive, because even though if you use context clues, if you have listened to you, Jess, if anybody listens to you talk for a little bit, they'll know that you care and you would never mean to. Then there are people who, they don't care at all. They don't care about offending anybody. They don't care about using a specific kind of language. They don't care about bringing up whether the author is problematic or the themes are problematic. Problematic being like, again, up for interpretation. I'm just meaning that people expect certain individuals to be perfect, and then the other ones, it's almost like why bother? Which sort of taps into something we don't need to dive too far into unless you want to, but it's like the publishing industry, there are a lot of aspects to it that, could be improved upon. And it feels like it's like we almost feel too helpless, like we're never going to make a change by doing anything. So as a result, we're going to go for I hate using the word target to imply that there's like malicious intentions, but we're going to go for the easiest target, because that will make me feel like I did something, like I changed something, I made the world better because I told this one person, hey, this one random person on Booktube, hey, when you worded it this way, it came across this way, and that's offensive. And or not even emailing, but just tweeting about it and just being like, this person, how could they? And
you can't shame the shameless, so they go after the people that can be shamed.
And I feel bad because there are certain things, of course, that definitely we can be better about, and that us as individuals can keep working on. But there is also, just kind of tying back to this particular thing of like, does it go too far sometimes? There are some things like Jess brought up in one of her videos that somebody within publishing was like, we already have our Angie Thomas, basically saying like, we already have our staple Black author. And I'm like, that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem to me. And Jess not having, the authors being white in that specific video that she had recommendations for a specific trope. I don't know that Jess in that area, like, I hate to put things above others, but I'm like, I kind of feel like this over here with publishing is way worse, but you feel like you're making more of an impact if you go after the person that you see, and like because you're more likely to get a response too and a reaction.
Right. And I think it also goes back to your audience, right? Like you're going to attract, you're attracting an audience of people who care about these issues. That's why they're mentioning it, versus the people like Elle was talking about, or the shameless, where they're going to attract an audience who also doesn't care about those things. So they're not going to get called out on those things. So I think, it does go back to the whole audience thing, and how there's a different audience for every creator, and you're going to attract the kind of audience that enjoys hearing the kinds of things that you have to say.
Or in this instance, Izzy and Jess both talking about, you almost feel like you have to be in tune with everything that audience feels, because you're presenting an issue that has come up. So you're going to know every in and out thing about that issue, whatever it is that's being discussed. Like you're going to have all the most progressive, forward thinking thoughts about this particular thing. And I mean, forward thinking or progressive being up for interpretation, right? But
that's why I have so much respect for you guys, because that's something that I feel like I wouldn't be able to do or wouldn't be able to do well, and it's like a huge pressure that I wouldn't want for myself. So mad props to you guys for being willing to step into that space and doing your best to educate others. And it just comes back to what I was saying earlier. We're all just people, we're doing our best, and I wish that some viewers would just understand that and respect that, like, we're not, this isn't our job for most of us.
I feel like also you're kind of sometimes like damned if you do, damned if you don't, because there are, you know, a multitude of people in the world and various types of people with different opinions watching Booktube. And like I made a video about Sarah J. Maas just moving my books. That's all I was doing, just moving them out of viewing range because it was a personal decision I wanted to do. And I said in the video, like, I'm not judging anybody who leaves their Sarah J. Maas books up. Like, I don't care. Do what you want with your own shelves. And like, I'm still going to read her one series as it comes out. I just might not buy, I don't know. Like, it was just very much like, I just wanted to like let people know because I'm known for liking these books. Like, it's like part of my brand, man, whatever you want to call it. And I had a lot of people being like, oh, good, yay, like whatever. But then I had people being like annoyed and being like, oh, this cancel culture. I'm like, who am I canceling? Am I canceling her by saying I'm moving the books just as a personal choice on my?
Mine are literally hiding on the bottom shelf because you never see them.
You're going to take down Sarah J. Maas.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Single-handedly.
All her wealth, all her success gone because Joshana moved her book.
Single-handedly.
I'm helping you. It's fine. I literally stuck mine on the bottom shelf. I was like, no one will see them here except for when I'm on a video. It's fine.
Yeah. And yeah, like, and then someone was like, oh, geez, we had to make a whole video about it. I'm like, I wanted to. It's my channel. I felt like it. Shut up and leave me alone.
Well, I also, so that's kind of, I know, you know, I think there is truth in that you attract like-minded or similar, but at the same time, sometimes your interests attract a certain audience that might not line up with you. So I think there are so many amazing fantasy fans, but and I've mentioned this a multitude of times, but being a Witcher fan attracts a certain audience, and sometimes they're disgusting. And I think just liking fantasy, and especially adult fantasy, sometimes there's like a different audience for both the YA and the adult, and there's some overlap. Like some people are like me where they enjoy both adult and young adult fantasy, but there's clearly some that are like they only come to my channel for the adult stuff, and then there are some that more so come for the YA, which great. I'm glad I can provide content for both. But it's when I'll see, because honestly, it's usually the specific certain kind of fans from the adult fantasy, the dude bros. We'll just call them what they are. There's the dude bros in fantasy. If you don't like these certain fantasy books, then what are you even talking about? And you have, you know, and it goes further than that. It can get very condescending, very rude, very dismissive. I have basically every sexist term you can think of as one of the words where if that pops up in a comment, it'll just immediately block that comment so that you can't even see it. Because when I first started my channel, you get like, I mean, I don't want to say them, right? Because this is like a happy thing for charity, Worldhoppers is. But, they're, you know, all the words, any word you can think of negatively about women, I would get them all the time over the most random videos, or even something like, I had this one person I'll just say because this one's not as negative, but just like all these dumb hoes with their stupid little hi guys, like at the beginning of their videos, like just a bunch of dumb sluts. And like, you're like, first off, if you're going to use the words, like, have you seen me? I'm covered head to toe in like extra large shirts all the time. So at least use it accurately, please. Just kidding.
You're saying hi guys.
Hi guys.
You got all that dirty girl.
That is the hallmark of a slut and a hoe. Let me tell you. Hi guys.
Hi guys in oversized t-shirts.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. You can never call women any of those things. But I'm just like, your insults are not even relevant right now. You're just like, lady that I feel sexual frustration towards, and then you're just like spitting whatever words out that you can. And it bums me out because it's like, I try to be optimistic. I try to be really nice. I also try to be open-minded both to like the things that, you know, Jess was saying, there's all these different viewpoints that you're trying to kind of figure out which ones do I align with. Okay, well, maybe I don't feel that way, but I'm going to keep listening. And then also, I've seen a lot of people leave comments saying that they personally, when they go to pick up a book, they're not going and watching all the reviews. They're not looking at what's the tea on the author, what's the drama on this book and the themes. Like, they'll go to the store, they'll pick up a book, they'll read it, and they'll form their own opinions. And some people don't care. Like, they just want to know about the book. They don't want to know about all that other stuff. And like Shauna was saying, you know, darned if you do, darned if you don't, because then there are people like, how dare you not tell us that this author did this thing? And then you're like, okay, one, I might not have known. Two, maybe I did know, but certain booktubers aren't going to feel like the need to say it. And then three, what if you don't think it was that bad? Like, then there's that line too, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really good point about audience, Elle. And like, sometimes people just find your channel based on, you definitely get a lot more of that than I experience. So it's definitely true.
But your Wheel of Time video.
Oh, that's true.
Was the one that.
Yeah. And never mind. I'm not going to say that. I've had a really racist comment on a non-book related video that was very disturbing, and I was like, what the heck? So
I almost feel like the really disturbing comments are less bothersome because you're like, okay, and then you just ignore it. But it's not trying to say like you shouldn't have been bothered by that comment.
Right.
I know the one, but
I'm only not mentioning it because it's not book related. But yeah, I've had a couple of like super racist comments that I'm just like, well, this came out of nowhere. But in general, because my channel is so small, I don't get a lot of that stuff. So that's a really good point, Elle, about like attracting like-minded viewers. It also cannot be that way for sure.
Yes.
So I do want to say we've been recording for over an hour, and there's still quite a few other aspects to this conversation we could chat about. Do you guys want to keep chatting, or do you want to save some of this for maybe a part 2, maybe a part 3, depending on how much we chat? What do you guys think?
I mean, I'm good to stay.
I'm good.
Like, don't everybody speak at once.
Well, we'll go into one that I feel like everybody touched on at the beginning of this, which is, do you find you spend more money? A less controversial topic, although on Booktube
it's pretty controversial.
Yes,
it's one of the most, because somehow we feel entitled to knowing about how people spend their money and judging people for it. But anywho, let's go in order. We can go right back how we were doing before. Leanna, start us off.
The answer is yes.
Conversation over.
I mean, like it's both, because I mean it's a vicious cycle, and there's multiple reasons for it. One is like, if you're spending more time on reading, which we all said we do now, we spend more time on reading, then it's more on your mind and you're more looking for more of it all of the time. Then you're also more aware of books that you weren't aware of before, so now you're buying those. Then you're aware of special editions that you weren't aware of before, so now you're buying those. And then you like look at people's shelves and you get shelf envy, and you're like, what's on there? It looks so pretty. I don't even know who those authors are, but it looks real nice, and I want that collection as well.
You can always tell when someone's new to watching Booktube, because they'll be like, where did you get those white Sanderson books? And I'm like,
I remember I had a video, like, I wasn't even talking about Ninth House, but like for a while, like where I was filming and how I was set up, the part of my shelves that had Ninth House was like right behind me. And I was not talking about Ninth House in that video, but someone commented and they said, sorry, I'm new to your channel, but have you ever explained why you have multiple copies of Ninth House? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I need to explain why I have multiple copies of the same book.
Yeah.
No, I have never ever explained this, because there is no need to.
Yep. Someone did that with Six of Crows, and I'm like, because it's the collector's edition? Not the regular one? Like,
so I've started doing, now we're going out of order, but I'm going to be doing a video series where I try as much as possible to compare as many editions as possible. And I will have a lot of editions of specific books, like different foreign editions and special editions, like the amount, because the first one I'm doing is Shades of Magic. The amount of Shades of Magic editions that I will have now is a lot. And so that's another thing too, is like putting money in for specific videos at times. Not even just, I mean, obviously you want to read the books that you buy, but then there's the, like, being able to do something like this video series is requiring of me to have the books for the most part, so I can show other people as often as possible. But on a more basic form of an answer for this, I think that I also just really like going to the bookstore. Like my husband and I, that's one of our favorite things to go do. It's just like, do you want to go to the bookstore? Like just this morning, he's like, when you're done filming, do you like want to go to the bookstore? So it's just, but then we were like, should we? Because we probably shouldn't because we have so many books. But we also have great local used bookstores too. But absolutely on Booktube, if I see somebody talking about a book, I'm like, dang, that sounds good. Or just even somebody's Instagram stories, I'm like, dang it, that book sounds awesome. Or that cover, what's that book about? And then I got to go look it up. And so, yes, I definitely spend more on it and than I probably previously would have. But at the same time, our local used bookstores are so good. Joshana knows because she lives here too. Our local used bookstores are great at giving you store credit. So you read some books and then you finish those books and then you take them in and then you use your store credit to get more.
Yeah, I definitely spend way more and I'm ashamed of it because I am a librarian. So I should be using my library, but I also love going to the bookstore and it's one of my favorite things to do is just to go to the bookstore. But I will say that one of the positive things about it is in the past, I feel like what we were talking about where I would go to the bookstore and just buy kind of what I thought was interesting. At times that did not work for me. I would hate a lot of the books because I didn't know anything about them. So I do think the fact that there are so many people on Booktube that I follow that read such a variety of things, I'm able to pinpoint something that I would actually like. And when I buy it, I end up actually keeping it because I liked it. Whereas before I would just waste a lot of money.
That's a great point. So in a way, Booktube's sort of helping your wallet.
Kinda.
Spend money on the things that you're actually going to keep.
Not buy less, but buy smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do want to add libraries. We love also going to libraries. It's just like they're only gradually sort of starting to open up again. Yeah. So that's libraries are great. But I do think that Booktube, and again, this is like we could go into the whole consumerism thing, but I don't know that that conversation has happened so many times. Yeah, Deshauna, no. But at the end of the day, I also feel like, if we want authors to be successful, for myself anyway, while I do want to support my local used bookstores, I also try to buy books when I can because I appreciate what authors are doing, and that's how they make a living. As far as with series too, a lot of times if the first book in a series doesn't do well, the author won't get signed for future books. Mm-hmm. And so I know that sometimes there's like, why would people buy a book if they haven't even read it yet? And it's like, well, a lot of it has to do with the pre-orders and how well pre-orders do and how well the books do initially when it's like the first in a series. And if I end up liking it, great. And if I don't, then I can take it to my used bookstore. But I don't mind spending the money because it feels like almost an investment because I'm like talking about the books on my channel also, if that makes sense. Kitties.
Yeah. I joined Booktube last year. I honestly started buying more books when I found Bookstagram at first, because I kind of found them around the same time, but it was like I was seeing pictures of books, and then I really like finding Bookstagram got me kind of back into reading after like years long slump, like same Jay during college. I wasn't reading a lot. And so I was like discovering all these series that had already been out. So I was like, ooh, so I was like so happy I didn't have to wait for books. I was buying a bunch of books and I was buying them from Amazon so they were cheaper, or I would go to my Goodwill that I had in Washington. Used to have I was like, who is coming to this Goodwill? Because I found so many books in that Goodwill that I used to buy. And I will say, at first when we moved here to Sicily, I wasn't buying as many books because I wasn't working and I didn't have an income. And so I had all my books that I brought with me and using the library, and then I would buy some occasion, or my husband would buy me some occasionally. And I have been buying more books as I've made some change from YouTube, and less for like a haul, because honestly, when like my hauls don't do super well, like some people post a haul and it's like mine don't do that great. So, I mean, eventually like I'll film one, but it's just like, I want the books. So it's either they're pretty, like Leanna was talking about special editions, or I've been reading more nonfiction and I realized I want to have a copy when I read it so that I can annotate. And so, they've just been arriving and I'm like, well, and then my husband was like, well, we could get shelves for downstairs. And I'm like, oh, really? And then there's more space. And I'm like, well, I don't want the shelves to be empty. And
I think for a lot of us, books are how we decorate our home. So it's that it's not just buying
decor.
Books. It's decor.
And I was like, well, it's a new filming location and there's books behind me. So I
have to add too, really quick. That's another thing going back to what we were talking about before with like the weird sorts of comments and the condescending. And so it'll be like, they all just like film in front of their giant wall of books. And I'm like, I'm sorry, if I had a cooking channel, wouldn't it be expected for me to be in my kitchen? Like,
yeah.
And if somebody doesn't have a bunch of books, that's fine. But it's like, it's the relevant thing.
Literally, it fits in. They're beautiful. Yeah. And so I'm like, I definitely, though the switch from trying to focus more on Bookstagram to Booktube has really, I have stopped buying a bunch of like bookish things, like bookish merch that I used to just see on Instagram, like candles and prints and pops and all. I'm like, oh, I don't even know what I'm going to do with it. So I just buy books now. So I feel a little better there also because I'm not spending all that money on candles. Yeah.
Well, that's the funny thing. That's actually how Jess and I met, is on Bookstagram. So we've known each other before Booktube, and I was on Bookstagram for a long time. And the one thing that I had never done in my life is buy a bunch of props so that you can take pictures. And the way they just sit in the corner doing nothing for me.
Oh my God, I have a whole closet that like I was hoping to like pare down when I moved, but I still have a full closet that's just props, merch, boxes they came in. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with all this.
I gotta say, it's like, to me, it's like arts and crafts when you're a kid, but you're like embracing that as an adult. And you're like taking these pretty pictures. And I know Alan one time was just like, why they all have like, what did he say? Something like berries and pine cones. I don't know. And I was like, they're pretty. And so anyway, I do like occasionally going to Michael's or Ross and seeing what like potpourri mixtures they have. And being like, you know what, I'm going to get some for like fall. It's always around fall that I want to take all the Bookstagram pictures. In the spring and the summer, I'm like, these colors are not aesthetically pleasing for my.
There are so many skulls in my house, but they were all for Bookstagram. Mm-hmm. But I just look like I have problems.
I think it's fun. Is it perhaps not the most useful thing? Of course. But I do think that I will say I've never been like a Funko Pops kind of person. So for me, like I wouldn't want that. Or the pillows that people get, like, I don't really want a pillow. But candles I can use. Yes, I have that one. I don't have that one.
Funkos.
But like I will use bookmarks. I will use the candles, and then I can get something out. Like I love art prints. I will use them as bookmarks. I'll use them as bookmarks because I just think like, oh, how fun. It's the characters. And I know Jade's she doesn't care about character art at all, but I love it. But I think that's just so funny that both of you brought up. Because, I think there's more of a phase for me with Bookstagram. The mugs. There's more of a phase for me with Bookstagram being like buying those sorts of things or all the goodies. So I think that's a really good point. Booktube, at the end of the day, like, I do want to read books, so I don't mind buying books. But with the other stuff, it's like I have to think about, will I actually use that?
Yeah, I genuinely feel like I actually spend less money doing Booktube than I did with Bookstagram because there is that whole pressure of keeping up with an aesthetic and building an aesthetic that usually has to do with props. That's what people like to see. Or you just get sucked in by the candles.
The candles had me bad for a while. I got a whole
huge
cart
drawers of my
dangerous.
dresser filled with candles,
Look at
not
me.
closed.
Those alchemy and ink
Oh
releases.
my God.
You had to be ready. I was stretching
Yeah.
beforehand. I was like, I'm getting these candles.
I
So
was
maybe
at
so-
work. I would be at work, like,
Yes.
sorry, I
had
can't
to
help
take a
you
break.
right now. I've got to get these candles.
I had a friend of mine that actually I rep her mugs, but she also loves candles, and like she was a stay-at-home mom making mugs. So like whenever I would need to be at work when Alchemy and Ink was dropping candles, she was like, "I'll order for you too." And I'm like, "Thank you."
But my husband would try and me. I was like, this is what's on my wish list. It was a real race. She's shifted. Sadly, she does different kind of candles, but ooh, what a time. What a time.
That's adorable, though. I think that's cute. What good friends and spouses.
Hey, that's what they're there for.
Speaking of good friends,
Candles.
with freaking book collecting, Elle has supplied most of my Wuthering Heights collection. And now Leanna is an instigator and an enabler because she's constantly sending me links
Yes.
of like, did you see this edition? I'm like,
Oh no.
I didn't, because I don't pay attention to any
I
of
don't
those.
need to know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
don't pay attention to it at all, but I do. I buy lots of them. I had someone comment one time on my Wuthering Heights collection video from like a year or so ago. I have more now, and they were like, "Wait, so these are all the exact same book?" I was like, "Yes." Like I didn't know if they were joking or like being funny or being rude, or if they were genuinely confused. So, like, yes, it's all Wuthering Heights by Emily Bryant. Like, but it's the same content inside. I was like, I don't need a jerk right now.
That's the point.
Like, yeah, I don't know what's happening. Bye. I was so confused.
Just block.
Like, have you never heard of this before? But yeah, I definitely buy more now for sure. But I do try. I say try because then when I go to the local bookstores and I trade in, I'm like, well, this it's like free money. It's not because I spent money on those books that I'm trading in, but in my head. So then I'll just buy books that I haven't read, but I try to only, hi Luna. I try to only buy books that I have read. That doesn't always happen. But then I'll do the thing of like, well, I need the paperback and the hardcover because I like to actually read the paperback. And so if I want to reread it, but like it's my favorite, so I also want the hardcover. Duh.
Of course. This makes sense. This makes perfect sense.
I do that with my Kindle, Jashana. Like if I buy something on Kindle and I'll start reading it, I'm like, you know what? It's
I need
I need Especially if it's getting good, I'm like, oh no, we need a
Yeah.
I need to hold it.
I never got into like my Bookstagram. I just posted a selfie today on there. So like I'm the worst with like Bookstagram. Like my pictures are just like the book on my comforter. And I'm like, here we go. Or like on my desk. Like I don't do any of the props and the cute stuff. I just can't be bothered. And I never got into like book boxes. I never wanted them because I was like, I don't want all the stuff. What am I going to do with this? I don't want it. Like even
What you're gonna do
candles.
with it is take Bookstagram pictures to make other people want it too.
I don't want to do that. It's like too much effort. I don't care.
On the topic of like an aesthetic or whatever for your Instagram, because occasionally I used to only post pictures of books, and then eventually I started posting like fun pictures with my dog, or as you just saw her. But I so obviously use like a filter, and I don't mean like a filter so like I look amazing or something. Like I use a filter so that everything looks kind of blue.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had not very many, but a couple people that are like this. I started an Instagram account for my dog, and they're like, hey, Luna, you should try to keep your account natural, unlike your mom's with all the or whatever. And I was like, so I replied as Luna, like, please, this is supposed to be a positive place with the word like no passive aggressive comments toward my mom allowed or something like that. And then I don't know if they left it there or what, but I'm like, what? I'm not, it's so obviously, it's not like I'm photoshopping like my cellulite out of my butt when I'm in my swimsuit and like making my waist thinner. Like it's clearly supposed to be bluish. Do you think I actually think like people will never know that this is not a filter on it.
I'm not a Smurf.
Anyway, so I just thought it was funny on the topic of an aesthetic.
Yeah, I just can't be bothered to like care about it. And like bookmarks, I only use the magnetic clip bookmarks. So I don't want bookmarks. Like they're pretty. They look very pretty. And like art prints also, I'm like, they're really pretty, but what am I gonna do with it? Nothing. Candles, same thing. I just don't care. So it's definitely just books that I'm spending money on, but I'm spending too much money on. I keep track, like that's part of my like yearly stats that I keep track of how much I spend. And I do use the library. This year I haven't as much, but a fair amount. And I keep track of how much I save by using the library, like what I would have paid for this book if I bought it. And so I saved that money by reading it. And this year so far, it is out of whack. I am spending way more than I
kind of truth that I don't want to know about myself. So I do not track that.
I tried to do it once. It was not good for me.
I fell off halfway through this year on that one. For
It's
sure.
especially bad. It's especially bad when you think you're doing a good thing by going to the library. You're like, oh, I'm saving myself money. And then you really like the book and you're like, well, just going to go buy this next time I'm at the bookstore, which is why I have so many books.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably
the thing about
Go ahead.
Just real quick, because it ties into what we were just saying about the saving money at the library. For me, the thing about that doesn't work is that which I will talk about how I buy books in a second after Izzy. I almost never pay full price for a book. And so like it's not super accurate for me to be like, I saved this much full price book by using the library because I wouldn't have bought that book at full price. So anyways.
So I predominantly read digitally, and most of the books on my shelves behind me I have read. So they're books I actually liked, or they're vintage romances. So I do collect like old school romances with like the clinch covers. And I'm a member of 3-4 libraries.
Nice.
So you can get like the Brooklyn one if you're out of state for like $50 a year. So I have that. I have scooped up friends' library cards. Thank you. Putting that in my Libby. We all share with each. It's fine. We all share our card numbers, and so I reading romance though. Like that's a lot of KU books. So I don't buy a lot of them because like indie pubs are expensive. Like you're looking at $15-$16 a book. So I always wait, and then like I'll go to book events and buy my books. So I buy a lot digitally, kind of, but they're like 99 cents. $3.99. It adds up, but it's like kind of a different process reading romance, I feel like, versus like when you read fantasy and stuff where I feel like the other genres you can find on sale a little easier often than you do romance necessarily. And like, especially now that we're getting out of the mass market paperbacks and into these weird sized paperbacks that are $10 and a whole thing or $15. And I'm like, I read this in 3 hours. Am I really going to spend that much on it? No, I'm going to get it from the library. So that's kind of, so it had like, I feel like I check more out through KU and the library than I buy, if that makes sense. I'm paying for KU. And for Bookstagram, I'm like Shoshana, I'm lazy. I'm like, it's on my plaid blanket. Here you go. Here's my coffee cup.
I feel like the special edition Leanna and I got of Strange the Dreamer, you could buy 100 romance books for like the digital for what the Strange the Dreamer special edition.
And like I have like, special editions, Shades of Magic and Laini Taylor books, and certain ones I have like 3 editions of the Kiss Quotient because I love that book. So like I have hardcover, paperback, I have the UK edition. So I do it. It's just like this tinier quantity.
So my subterranean press books are my retirement fund.
Or like $1,000.
Yeah, are you really going to sell them when you need money when you're retired?
The thing with a lot of those things too, though, like the way I think of it is like it's $80 to buy it, but it's limited edition, and to resell it is going to be at least double that. So like, why not?
Going for, I've seen some people trying to sell them for $1,000, and the Red Rising Fairy Loot editions, I want them so bad. Most of the time are at least $700 or $650.
Book resales are ridiculous.
It's insane. Crazy. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Like, I'm like, before Jay Kristoff committed another thing. I was trying to get the UK before they were reprinted by Illumicrate. People had those up for like £1,000, not even dollars. I was like, you must be kidding me. And yeah, I understand selling it for more, but they are like 10, 12 times. I'm like, this is ridiculous. It's almost like, because my husband is into sneakers, and so it's almost as bad as sneaker resellers, and I think that's absurd. Like, I hate it.
I know. I just randomly saw somebody trying to sell the original paperback covers of the Shadow and Bone trilogy for like $300. I was like,
Oh my god.
I could probably find those at a used store.
I traded those in at the local bookstore. I probably got like $10 for.
Yeah, you
told
should
you,
have
Shauna,
just put
you're
them
so
up. Depop. You should have.
Well. Again,
so
I can't
much.
be bothered. Sounds like a lot of effort.
I think I might have the original covers of those.
Yeah, you probably do.
That's what I'm saying. Is you could probably go to a used bookstore and find the used covers, and somebody is gonna buy that $300 set. You're like
Crazy.
Sorry. I was
Sorry.
gonna say, I'll spend a decent amount if it was like special edition originally. It's been a few years, it's not coming back in print or something. But yeah, the like $650, that's like the low point for what I see that Fairy Loot Red Rising going for. I'm like, come on. Though. Like,
that all makes me so happy because I own a lot of those, and I'm like, oh, I can make this much, and I can make this much, and I can make this much. Okay, great. I'm good.
I fall on hard times.
Right.
I got something to sell.
So
For a while.
I think my book buying habits maybe align more with Izzy's. I've never been a collector of books. And I think that, like, growing up, I would go to the bookstore, buy books, and then read them and put them on my shelves. But then as a poor college student, I use the library a lot. And then once I started getting into Booktube, so this tiny shelf behind me mostly has books that I bought the first year I was on Booktube, where I was like, okay, I'm going to only buy books after I read them and decided that they were favorites. And I want to like have a place to show my favorites behind me in my videos. So that's where I started. But then I realized every year I have like 20 favorites, and I just like was doing the math, and I was like, when is it going to end? Like I'm always going to be buying like 20 books a year, which I know does not sound like a lot to a lot of people. But I was just like, where am I going to put them all? I'm not much of a book buyer, honestly, not physically at least. So a lot of the books behind me are like old favorites, and eventually like they're not even favorites anymore, right? Because you read them like 10 years ago, and it's like, I don't know if I still like that book. I liked it when I bought it, So I don't buy a lot of books physically. For a while, I was like, I'll buy books that I'll reread. But I'm not a rereader. So like that didn't really pan out either. And now I just have like a whole like list, like, a virtual TBR, like a list in my head or on Goodreads of things that I want to read. And they're almost always available at the library. So when I do spend money on books these days, it's ebooks and audiobooks that I can't access through my library or through Scribd or whatever. Like if there's something that I want to read and I can't access it in a free way, then I will go out of my way to buy it. Very occasionally, I will pick up physical copies of books, but I just don't really have a place to put them. Like I have this tiny shelf, and then this thing that I film in front of actually has books in it. It has books in it that I bought at a library book sale where I got 2 paper bag sized things full of books they were like 25 cents each or something, and I've read like maybe 10 of the 2 paperback books. Like they're not really books that I actually want to read, which is why they're hiding inside that. But I actually purposely started filming in front of this thing because I got tired of seeing all of those like consumerism comments of people being like, everybody on Booktube just buys a bunch of books and puts it behind them, and And I wanted to show people that like you can be not that there's anything wrong with that, like obviously, but I wanted to show people that you can be a booktuber and not buy a lot of books. So I do 2 hauls a year. They tend to be kind of long because I do buy digitally, like I said, and I go over all of that. And when you buy digitally, I usually buy things on sale. Like I try not to buy more like a digital book, an ebook that's more than like $3.99, $4.99. That's kind of my cutoff. But usually that's more in the realm of $1.99 or $2.99. And yeah, I don't really spend a ton of money on books because when I do buy them, I buy them digitally and I try to get them really cheap. I try not to ever really buy things full price. That's just the kind of book buyer that I am. And I think there's nothing wrong with people who like to collect special editions and things like that, but I've just never been that kind of person. So I just want to put out there that you don't have to be that way to be on Booktube, because I know that a lot of viewers feel that way, or like feel like they can't be a booktuber because they don't have a huge book budget or whatever, but you don't have to be that way to be a booktuber. But again, there's nothing wrong with that as well. I totally understand being a collector and getting excited about, like, Leanna, some of your editions selling for that much, like, that's insane to me that someone would spend that much money on a book. Not you, but like the people who would spend like $600 on a book. Like, what? I just would never do that. I'm not that kind of person.
When I first started, we had something smaller than the thing that you have behind you, Jade, but something similar. And I just filmed in front of that, which was like, there was some books in there. And then gradually now I have these shelves. There's some other shelves. Sean has some shelves. Some of these books are Sean's books, you know, like it expands. And what I like is, even though we don't plan on ever having kids, I do have 2 little nieces. And then on Sean's side, there's some, like, you know, there's a nephew and then there's another child on the way and things. And I like the idea that our nieces and nephews can come to our house and it's like Tia and Theo's like library, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
that
really
is cool.
cute. They come to visit, and like as they're getting older, they can find things that they like to read. Or if a friend comes over who maybe isn't usually as much of a reader or something, and then they're like, what do you think I should read? This is what I like. Or I can find something off of it. And I think that aspect of it is fun. It's the like sharing of this thing.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I think also like your family dynamic kind of depends too. So my husband is not a reader. And the first time I suggested putting this tiny bookshelf in our living room, he was like, what are you talking about? Books don't belong in the living room. But I'm sure like some of you guys are like, oh my God, what? But like he just grew up not being around books, not being around readers. Like I grew up with, it wasn't the living room, but it was a living area. Like I didn't have to hide my books in a bedroom like I do right now. But we never host, and I don't have friends that read. Like nobody comes over to see what I'm reading. Like I just don't have that in my life. And if I did, maybe it'd be a little bit different. So I totally agree what you're saying, Elle. Like it is cool to be like, hey, come peruse my shelves so I can let you borrow something. I just don't have that.
I don't trust people with my books. So.
Yeah, no one's borrowing anything.
I had manga downstairs because no one will borrow only.
But what I do like is being able to ask people what they like to read and be able to suggest books that they might be interested in, which has nothing to do with book buying or whatever. But as far as like, do I spend more money on books now? Maybe, just because digital buying is dangerous because it's invisible, right? Like, yes. I don't know how many books I have and audiobooks that I have that I've had for years and never read. So one year I've made a spreadsheet, but I have not kept up with it. It's probably very out of date. So even though I get books for cheap, they kind of disappear into my Kindle, and then I may or may not actually end up reading them one day. So I do think I probably buy more books. They're just not physical, and I buy them pretty cheap. And I do use the library a lot. So that's the end of my answer.
Corey's answer now.
Yeah, so oh my God, I don't even know where to start. I do buy a lot of books. I buy a lot of books, and I don't know. I love the experience of being in a bookstore, walking around a bookstore, and I don't know, it's just the whole act of being in a bookstore and purchasing something. I don't know, it feels very comforting to me. So I enjoy buying books, but I'm obviously like mindful of what I'm working with in the store. I'm not like, let's blow the rent money, like, you know. And I don't know, I love seeing when people are talking about books and their wrap-ups or something like that, and immediately when someone's like, I love this. I'm like, oh, here we go again. Let me get to the bookstore. So yeah, I think it just has to do with, like we talked about, being hyper aware of what's going on in the book community, what everybody's reading. And it's just this hyper awareness just makes you want to, buy things. So
yeah, I think to add a little bit to that too is a lot of bookworms don't have other things they're spending a lot of money on. True. Because that is their hobby a lot of time. Not always, right? That's not to say like we're a bunch of losers who only read books. We do nothing else. But and you're not a loser if all you do is read books.
I am a winner who only reads books.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But like growing up, my mom, sunglasses and shoes. My mom loves her good pair of shoes. She has tiny feet. She has the display size. So she'll go to DSW and be like, ooh, look at this pair is on sale. And she'll get like 5 new pairs of shoes. And she loves shoes. She has so many shoes. I have like 1 pair of flats for when it's cold and a pair of sandals for when it's hot. And they match my purse. And I shoes are not a thing for me, right? Like I know Jess was saying like her husband's sneakers is a big thing. And for my husband, he doesn't really have much that he spends a lot of money on either. So for us, that's what a lot of our money goes toward. This is what we like to do in our spare time. I mentioned earlier, it's what we enjoy. Like Tori, you were saying, just the act of going to the bookstore. It's so fun to be there and be surrounded by all these books and all these possible adventures you can go on by reading them and things. So I think that we also don't go out a lot. We don't go out to, like the bar. We don't go out to clubs. We don't go out to, we're like, hermits, basically. We stay in our house and read books, play video games, and then I make videos talking about the books that I read like a few feet away from here. So I think that that's another aspect to this too, is like, yeah, we are kind of hyper aware. And yeah, like when, like you were saying, oh, well, I got to get that book. That sounds great. But at the same time, I don't know that it's because we're so involved with it. It's because it's part of like the community that we're in. And if we played sports, we'd constantly be getting new shoes, or we'd be getting like better equipment, or we'd be paying for somebody to give us lessons about like improving this. And so I think it's kind of, this is our thing for a lot of us. But like Jake was saying, there are different forms of book buyers. And I think even in this group, like we have a couple that are more digital, and Jess is currently like international. So getting something to her is more difficult. Deshawn and I have great used bookstores. And then Leanna and I are talking about like editions and things. So and then like Steph was saying she works at a library and she's buying. It just goes to show there's so many different aspects of it. But like, I'll be cheesy and be like, but we're all banding together because of our books.
Yeah. And I mean, like what Jade was saying, like we love to buy books. We love being in bookstores, but you don't need, I think when we talk about like the consumer conversation on Booktube, I think we tend to get into, you need to buy all of these books to be successful, quote unquote, like on Booktube. Yeah. And I think we're looking at it from I like to buy books. I'm so much in this community. I want to read what they're reading because, I, like Jess was saying, I don't post many hauls. So I'm buying these books behind the scenes, but I'm not like, look at the 50 books that I just got. It's just like for me.
If it's your disposable income, then like dispose it as you wish.
Yeah, it's your money. I need to drop the judginess of it. The other thing I wanted to say is that I think that when it comes to the like dollar per hour of entertainment, books, you get a lot for your money. Like think about how much people spend when there are people who love to go to movie theaters, right? Which is also something I never do because it's way overpriced. And I would rather wait and watch a movie at home. I'm just not into that like movie theater experience. And some people are really into that and they'll spend a bunch of, I don't know, whatever you think a bunch of money is. But to me, it's like a lot of money for like a 2-hour movie. But you can pay you can pay about the same for a book and get way more, well, depending on how fast you read, way more for your like bang for your buck or whatever. So I think in general, like when it comes to spending money on books, it's not that much like, it's not a bad bang for your buck when it comes to how much entertainment you're getting. So like by me saying that I don't spend a lot of money on books, I'm not saying that I don't think it's worth it and that people shouldn't do it. That's just not how I choose to spend my money. And everyone chooses to spend their money. Like Leanna was saying, it's your discretionary income. Like do what you want with it. And we should not like be judging people for it. But also one thing, going back to what Elle said a long time ago about supporting authors and like getting their second books and series signed and stuff, I have a ton of guilt about that because I don't like buy books, and I often don't read a book until like a first book in a series until more of the series is out, because I want to know that I'm gonna like it, like based on reviews and stuff. And so I feel guilty about that, especially as a booktuber, because I feel like I'm not supporting authors the way that like I should or could be. But that's just how it is for me, and I just have to. I tell myself there are plenty of other people who do those things, that like my one person doing those things or not doing those things isn't going to make a difference. But as someone who doesn't buy a lot of books, I definitely feel guilty about that.
That's why I think it's important when it comes to like how we see what we're going to spend money on via like, you know, the ways that BookTube has affected us. I think that it's important to not tell people like this is how you're supposed to do it, because different things support different things. So like a lot of people are all about their indie bookstores, but for some people, because there's like bookshop.org, right? Which it's a good alternative to Amazon. Is it as cheap? No, it's going to help your indie bookstores, but it's so much cheaper and probably faster to get something from Amazon. And so, I mean, Jashawn and I say all the time, like, do your best for like what you're capable of. Some people can't afford to be buying books, or some people that money is going to go elsewhere. Maybe the money that you're not spending on books is going to go towards something else that's going to be supporting whatever, right? Every aspect of how we do this. A lot of us are very caring, empathetic people. We care about a lot of causes, and we put money toward those things, or we put whatever. You get the idea, right? But I think that if all of us went digital, then say goodbye to bookstores, you know, say goodbye to a lot of authors' careers, because you're depending on how their contracts work out with how much money they make via the digital copies or whatever. And I just think it's important that there's like an openness to understanding that people have different circumstances. Sometimes they can't afford things, sometimes they choose not to, sometimes they do. And it's just, that's kind of what makes authors have a chance to have a career, and what makes us have a chance to get to enjoy these stories that they're crafting. Yeah. So we did, Jashana's like, I didn't want to do the booktuber consumerism conversation. Okay, we've almost been chatting for 2 hours now, and I feel like probably a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Other aspects to all of this that we could get into even more if we ever wanted to do a part 2. I know, like, for example, we didn't talk about like the DNFing of books, and do we feel like we do that more or less now? Reading slumps and things like that. We didn't go into that as often or as much as probably we could have. So we could do more in the future. But anyway, it's been really fun chatting with everybody. We'll have everyone's channels linked down below. Was there any last little bit that anybody wanted to add to this? Is everybody good?
Buy books. Support your local bookstore.
Buy Worldhoppers merch. It helps go to charity.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.